Data ecosystem for short. Let's go to the next slide. All right. So now we're going to just do kind of a super quick introduction to the project. I'm going to present for a few minutes, and then we will get back to conversation. Oh, there's a demo too. So next slide. So it's charting the GC data ecosystem and building the resource directory. What does that mean? Next slide. Just a big caveat, all of this is super beta. Some of it's alpha. This is a collaborative prototype. You can look at it that way, or even a proof of concept. Next slide. Yeah, very much a collaborative project. So Medina and I are basically we're kind of on at halftime each sort of thing. And then we're engaging with folks all over the GC really in terms of helping to build it out. Next. The purpose is to learn what we're doing across the system. So very much, data is a huge emphasis of the government these days. We all know we need to be more data oriented, make better use of the data we have, all that good stuff. From my position at PCO, this project sort of began with us thinking about, okay, what are we going to do with the GC data strategy? It's due for a refresh. And the question was, well, who's doing what? So to learn what we're doing across the system is one of our goals. Next slide. And we also want to capture and share emerging knowledge. So as folks across the system are doing good work, can we grab any of that and share it so that others can build upon it and don't have to kind of reinvent the wheel? Basically, so that we can all act strategically and we can move forward faster. Informing conversations and decision making is part of the goal, as well as sort of enabling working folk to get to where they need to go faster. So part of that might mean pointing to things like standards. Next slide. Yeah, so why are we doing this? I mean, we just talked about a couple of reasons why we're doing it, but also because there's just so much activity. And, the GC data strategy for the Federal Public Service has 21 recommendations covering 4 pillars, lots of stuff going on. Most major departments have a data strategy now. Many have chief data officers that we didn't have 2 or 3 years ago. Tons of stuff happening. And, we've all been head down, especially through COVID, but, doing stuff. And again, it's a question of how can we connect some dots? How can we share what we've been doing? How can we learn about each other's work? Next slide. So the need is immediate. COVID has shown us that, then if it's not COVID, it's going to be climate change. If it's not climate change, it's going to be reconciliation. If it's not reconciliation, it's going to be the economy. So we've got lots happening in the world around us and government's being expected to respond. We need to get better at what we do. Next slide. So a few details on the project, and then I'll show you a prototype. So there are a couple of projects that are sort of related. So what we're trying to do with this slide is there's the data ecosystem project, which is in the red box there. That's what we're talking about today. But there is also another project coming out of PCO led by my colleague Paul Guerra that's called the Data Landscape Project, and where he's sort of digging into using Wardley mapping to dig into some of the underlying capabilities and structures supporting potential priorities. We share some goals in that top left-hand corner. We want better informed policy and strategic decisions. We want shared understanding of who's doing what, and we want to make opportunities for collaboration and knowledge sharing. Yeah. Next slide. So yes, so if we zoom in on the data ecosystem, what we're talking about today, it basically has 3 pieces. So, I mean, what we're trying to do is build a database, a directory, and some visualizations of what you might think of as the GC data world or the data ecosystem. So we have a database, which is basically, it is what it says it is. It's an Airtable database, has about 700 entities in it now, a bunch of connections between those entities. We have a directory, which I'll show you in a minute, and then we have some visualizations, which I'll show you in a second. So in terms of timetable, we've been at this on and off, I guess, for a while, but it sort of began in the spring of 2020 when I joined PCO. and I was tasked with conducting a scan of COVID data for situational awareness. So this was just the beginning of COVID and PCO RD results and delivery unit. We were, tell us what's happening. And we were reaching out to departments all over the place, find out what's going on with COVID. So there was a bit of a mapping exercise there. That sort of pivoted into conversations about how we can do better. The clerk at the time was talking about doubling down on data, sort of threw out this idea of creating a bit of a map, if you will, or a charting the ecosystem is what we're calling it. And in the winter, we held a design jam, sort of looking at how we might do it. We built a sort of a first prototype, had an interactive workshop at the data conference. And then in the spring, all of that was sort of happening under the auspices of PCO. In the spring, the GCDC, the GC data community got involved, and it's a full collaboration now. In fact, GCDC is basically leading the project. So I half work at RDU and I half work with the GC data community. And then this summer, we held a number of engagement workshops. We collected some more data, and we're in the process of sort of producing and finalizing latest sort of iterations of the prototype, as well as sort of moving out of the really early skunkworks phase and trying to come up with a way to collaboratively engage with larger numbers of folks in something we're calling the extended team. So next slide, please. So these are two examples of the prototypes. I guess, Medina, can you follow that link and we'll take a quick look at the visualization. So I'm not showing you the actual underlying data, but this is a presentation being generated out of the tool we're using, which is called Kumu, which is a cloud-based tool optimized basically for visualizing networks of various types. Not hardware networks, but more like social or stakeholder networks. If that ever loads, we can move on to the next one, eh? Oh, there we go. So we can share the link to this, actually. Oh, Medina's already shared it. It appears we have some bandwidth issues. That's what you get for having a live prototype. But okay, what's coming up there is that is a visualization of all 700 odd entities. We call them entities. And it covers everything from organizations to committees to communities. So you guys are in here somewhere, to policy instruments. And we're starting to add actual data sources. So basically what you're looking at is the big orange dots are organizations, and then the smaller red dots in this case are policy instruments, and they're all sort of connected through a variety of various types of connections. It might be that they are a member of a thing, or they are implicated by a policy, or they are the author of a policy, for instance. Yeah. So we'll just move forward. Yeah. So if you're looking at the actual prototype, there's a search function. You can try and find your organization. If it's not there, you can let us know. So you can focus and filter here. If you look down at the bottom, you see those are the filters of the various types. So you can look at just projects, you can look at just committees, just data sources, although there's not a ton of data sources yet. Initially, we stayed away from collecting actual data sources because we didn't want to position this project as something that some people might think of as a data catalog or a data inventory. It's not that rigorous, or at this point in time, at least, not intended to be that comprehensive. We're sort of at the highest level, trying to create some high level views and determine how they might be of value in terms of decision making and understanding the contexts in which we operate. So I guess, yeah, move on to the next one. Yeah, and the next one. So these next few slides are showing a couple of different views that we've just sort of been experimenting with, and we'll be continuing to evolve these as we get more data and so on. This view is saying, okay, what would an indigenous data view look like, perhaps? And so the gray dot in the middle of this is the Interdepartmental Collaborative Committee on Indigenous Data, and you can see it has like 37 members, those orange dots. And then if you can just hit the expand button, Medina, you know the one I mean, up there. That's it, expand focus. So you got 37, and then if you just go up one more level, what are those 37 connected to? You start to see how complex it is. And if you go up one more, it gets even sort of more complex. So, you know, what has that told us? It's told us kind of, it's visualized something we sort of already know, which is Indigenous data is a pretty complex space. Next slide, or next one, yeah. This is a sort of a broken view. If anybody knows CSS really well and wants to learn about Kumu and how to make this work, it would be great. But the intent here is, okay, if we just looked at the departments and we clustered them, in this case, based on the EMS, well, it's a simplification of the InfoSource classifications that or categorizations that the Treasury Board uses, just to sort of group them and say, oh, we could, you know, you could just look at sort of the justice and safety cluster, if you will, or the health and food cluster. Going ahead. This is a view we created for ESDC Data Week, which again is just kind of a prototype thing where ESDC actually provided us with the data set that drives this. And what you're looking at is the green octagons or divisions or branches, sorry, within ESDC. The size of them is determined by the number of links they have. And then it goes sort of branch, division, and then whatever the smaller category is. But again, here we're just, if you zoom in a little, you know, you can sort of find yourself in here, or they can find themselves in here if you're from ESDC. And it begins to illustrate some of the connections. In this case, we're really just mapping the fact that the organizational connections as opposed to the actual data flows. But, you know, with the right data, we could get into the data flows. Next. And this, I think this is our last one, which is just another demo. So here, all we're looking at is organizations and policy instruments. So the big orange dots are organizations and the red dots are policy instruments. So this begins to say, okay, well, when we talk about policy instruments that pertain to data, you know, who are the big players? And, you know, surprise, surprise, TBS, and even more specifically, the Office of the Chief Information Officer has a lot, but you can begin to explore and say, well, they're not the only players, right? There's a whole bunch of players in here, and you can kind of zoom in and maybe better understand the policy landscape, if you will. Okay, and then if we got one more, maybe, yeah, and then that's kind of the end of the quick demo. You can explore that demo yourself. That the link that we provided there is quite interactive, so you can actually get in and start creating your own filters and stuff if you want. Anyway, so we don't have to go into this. The link is there. Basically, what's happening is we got a friend of ours to write a Python script that actually exports a subset of the entities we've collected and basically populates a GCpedia page. So the idea here is that we're building this resource directory, which becomes something that folks can access quite easily. So you might come in here and go, well, you know, my DG wants me to update our data strategy. I wonder what other departments are doing. You could actually come into this directory and navigate through to data strategies. And you would you would find a link to the data leads GC Connects group. Actually, more specifically, you'd find a link to the folder in the GC data leads group that has a collection of data strategies from, I think, 20 or 30 odd departments. So all of this is about trying to make it more accessible, making this information more accessible. So you don't have to call up folks that you know. I mean, which is how we do it now, right? So let's move on. So this is where we need your help. So as we mentioned earlier, this is a collaborative project, and so far it's been kind of it's very much a proof of concept. Lots of folks seem to feel that there's some value to this. So take a stab at maybe adding a little bit to this right now. You can contribute to this and make it better in like 5 minutes of your time. Okay, so I mean, basically, in terms of what we're doing, we're starting our extended team meetings. That's been happening this month, and what we're trying to do is create several streams of work where people can contribute, and we can continue to build this up. And this will be the last slide. So yeah, join us if you think this is cool, right? And you think it's useful and worth doing. We invite you to join. Basically, help this project grow and tackle the issues that kind of matter to you. The views that could evolve out of this will depend upon two things. Need is one, but perhaps even more important than need is sort of enthusiasm and support, because the views will grow in the direction in which we have data and we have people willing to curate that data. I'll stop there.